Let's pivot from the finances and let's talk about impact campaigns. Because the way I see it, you're a change maker. Through your films, you're trying to positively impact the communities and people you're filming. You were running an impact campaign with your film Tangle Seas. Can you tell me a little more about that? But before that, can you tell me what an impact campaign is?
So, conservation films internationally, and India has started that recently as well, have something called a impact campaign. Impact campaigns are campaigns that run along with the film or after the film, which ensure that the conservation issue that your film is addressing gets some sort of justice, or something happens to change the way things are with that conservation issue. Like policy change would be something, awareness would be something, petitions would be some thing which all goes, or campaigns like what Anglesey's has. There was something called Ban the Butt, which was about cigarette butts. Then we have a petition, we have a repository where you can store data about ghost nets, and that helps you locate where these nets are, what is causing them, which can be used for research. And we're also looking at petitions which have policy change, because at the end of the day, unless you don't put a rule or policy, things are not going to change. And when you work on an impact campaign, you have to be careful that it affects and it includes all the stakeholders of the conservation issue that you're looking at. In the case of Tangle Seas, you can't really talk about only fishermen and ignore the divers. You can't talk about large scale fishermen and ignore the small scale fishermen. You can't talk about tourism initiatives and forget the marine biologists. Whatever demand that you have through your impact campaign should be inclusive, that it finds solutions for everyone, or at least the most vulnerable stakeholders of that ecology or that conservation issue. Because otherwise, you are just going to make temporary change, and your movie will be over, your campaign will be over, and the situation will be back to square. So there was a film called Sea of Shadows, which asked TikTokers to put a link of their campaign in their bios. And TikTok is not something that is as famous or allowed in India, but it was a big deal for wildlife films, or smaller projects comparatively, for to get that sort of coverage. At the end of the day, when we need petitions, when we need change, when we need policy, we need signatures, we need more people to be aware about it. The more mainstream it becomes, the faster you get solutions. COVID, for example, because everybody got it, that's why we got a vaccine so fast. Otherwise, it's just lying somewhere. If a smaller population is affected, nobody really cares about it. So the more people who participate in your impact campaign, the faster it moves, or the more magnitude it has.
What was the impact campaign for Tangle Seas like?
We have a petition that is going on right now. So we have demanded simple things like giving a shelter to small scale fish workers and fishermen and fisher folks. So ghost nets are basically created because of wear and tear of the net. There's a storm, or there is something that the net becomes brittle because of direct exposure of sunlight, and it breaks off, or sometimes they cut it because they want to leave a protected animal, or sometimes it breaks off on its own. So something as simple as providing a shed would solve that problem. It would increase the life of the net, of the fishing net. Also, things like funding research for change of material, because initially fishermen used cotton based or comparatively biodegradable material, not the nets that we have. We had this whole economic boost that we wanted, and now it's just going to become worse with the blue economy thing coming.
What is the blue economy?
Blue economy is like how we had the green revolution and the white revolution. There's something that the government is trying to do with the fishery sector right now. So they will just want to show produce, they will just want to show numbers. So when that happens, there is compromise on quality. They just want to show conversions, like this year versus that year. This is the number we got. This is the number. This much tuna was there and this much tuna is there now. So when that happens, which also happened, I think in the 70s sometime, when they shifted to nylon. So if we demand a change of something that is affordable and still comparatively biodegradable, then it would help the ghost net problem. Also, third thing what the petition had was giving a market. Once you remove the nets, the divers and the fishermen remove the net out of the ocean, what with that? a lot of collection is happening right now, but it's just lying somewhere because they don't know what to do with those nets. It's not plastic, it's not sellable plastic, it's not a pet bottle, it's a net. So you can use it, maybe you can repurpose it into something, but unless the government takes it up and recycles it and does something properly with it, it makes no sense. So there needs to be a market and an incentive for the fishermen. Divers get it as a part of Dive Against Debris and whatever, divers see marine wildlife and they get out the nets because they care about it, but fishermen don't. I mean, it is a financial loss to them, but they still need an incentive to get those nets out. There are many things like that. These are just 3 out of those things in the 5 demands that we have in the petition. But there is a petition, there is a repository that we have, which I've already mentioned. Repositories, basically you can report if you find a net. Then we did Ban the Butt campaign, which basically was inspired by Chalk of Shame, which is a Swedish initiative where they went around and circled the cigarette butts that were lying on the road or around, and then when you circle them you realize how bad the litter is. So we did a lot of awareness campaigns and a lot of screenings, but because of the pandemic it was mostly digital, and whenever we got that little break between the waves is when we could do in-person events. But it would have been much better if the pandemic wasn't there.